that.
One more time, one more time. Great afternoon, everyone.
Buenas tardes, ¿verdad? Okay. Well, we're so excited to have you joining us this afternoon. I know, especially after such a great lunch and, the time to really enjoy entertainment, it's like, oh, we got to go back to learning again. But both Cecily and I are really excited to have you here. I'm going to take just a minute to introduce myself, and then I'll have my partner here introduce herself. My name is Melissa Castillo. I am joining you from the U.S. Department of Education. I'm a senior advisor in the Office of the Secretary, and my role is to really support his priority area around creating pathways for multilingualism for all. I've had the pleasure of working in this field for, this morning they said 28 years, and I wish I could stick to that number, but I need to update that to about 31 now, which is kind of, right? Something to be proud of, but it's also like, wow, right? And I think what's really exciting about that is that we're seeing changes happen in the way that they need to, but then there's also things that we still have a lot of work to do. And so I was especially appreciative when we ended up having a Latino Secretary of Education in the office that understands the importance of language and culture and what that represents, and how, if we are truly going to be a superpower as a nation, we need to ensure that our children are bilingual, biliterate, and bicultural. So that'll be enough of me, and I'll kind of share some things as we move along, and I'll hand it over to my partner here, Cecily.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Cecily Darden. I lead our family engagement work at the U.S. Department of Education. So super glad to be here. As a little bit of background, I've been in education probably just about as long as you have, Melissa. I'm holding on the age, but maybe I can keep upping the years of experience.
Yeah. One without the other, right?
But not always in this family engagement field, right? I was a researcher by training. And at the same time, in the evenings, I was like that mom with the eye roll from my teenagers, like, are you really at the school again? Are we dragged out to the school board meeting again? Yes, we are. This is what we're doing. And so it's really only in these last few years that professionally I do this family engagement work. All of you, I'm sure, are doing this work, whether it's as a parent or as a professional, and it's great to be able to blend those spaces. The bilingual space is important to me. I took Spanish all through school, and I just still wasn't like bilingual. So I went and lived in Mexico for a year, and so we, really got to that point of bilingual, but then pulled back. And so I will listen, and I will hear and understand most of what's happening, and I very rarely will actually speak in Spanish, but please try me. Push me a little bit, and I'll join in. But knowing the power of that, my youngest son has been in a full bilingual immersion program since kindergarten, and the power of having that is something that you can't take away. Right. It creates different brain cells, synapses, and everything. And so I just wanted him to be able to really reap the rewards of that. So I'm speaking to you as a mom, as a professional in this space, and we're going to really go into what we do here at the U.S. Department of Education that supports your work and your space as parents and as advocates for bilingual education, but then also engagement in families in that space. So,
well, thank you. Woo! All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Let's see, maybe I'm not on here. Oh, I am. Can we go to the next? Thank you. Well, so we just wanted to, again, we're always trying to exemplify language. I wish that I could at least welcome you in half of these languages, right? Hence why the creating pathways to multilingualism to all, the word bilingualism and biliteracy has actually gotten a little bit behind the times, and now we're saying we want to see more than that. So we're so excited to have you here. I love the connection or the intersection between family engagement and multilingualism, because the reality is whatever we want to do in school and need to do better, we can't do without you. And so it only made sense that Cecily and I be here together and we speak about the work that's happening in terms of these spaces. So we've done our welcome and introductions. You know a little bit about us. We're going to talk about what do we mean by family engagement. As you know, and I heard it earlier in Carolina's session, that this idea has changed, right? And at the federal level, what we're being expected to now do and how we speak to family engagement is different than what we have historically talked about in terms of parent involvement, right? So that word engage really takes it to a different level, which means that we have to be very intentional and thoughtful in the work that we're doing to work alongside you and with you. We're going to talk a little bit about why it matters. Cecily especially has some amazing quotes from researchers that really understand the significance of this work. And we're going to really try to punctuate why exactly it's so important and why it's so important that our partnerships flourish as our children continue to move through their educational journey. And then I'm really excited about sharing what we recently updated and put out to the field last October, which is our new English Learner Family Toolkit. Navigating the U.S. public school system is a really hard thing to do, whether we are born here or not, right? And so we want to make sure that our families that have come to us from wonderful parts of the world to now join us here, that they understand how to navigate that system, that they understand the rights that their children have inside of school, outside of school, how we keep them healthy and how we keep them safe. And I'm going to share that with you today. And I'm looking forward to hopefully that becoming a resource that you will use over and over and over and over again and share with your communities as well. And then Cecily's also going to share some additional resources that the department has created under her wonderful leadership that not only support our English learner families, right, but all families. All right, so I'm not going to go into specifics about federal law around family engagement, but I just want to punctuate again this shift from parent involvement to family engagement, and that we're really required to ensure that we have regular two-way communication between family members, school staff, and in the languages that our families can understand. I was already stopped a few times this morning being asked specifically about that. How is it that we ensure as families that don't speak English as a first language have access to the conversations, the information that's being provided by our local school board, our site administrators, our district administrators, and our state administrators, right? We need to ensure accessibility is a priority. Hence, that was one of the things that I shared this morning that I appreciate most about this conference. I mean, 9 languages being interpreted is a huge feat, and I applaud the organizers of this conference in ensuring that the information being delivered is accessible to everybody that has joined us here. And so, again, it matters. You will have this in your information. We're going to talk about it as we go throughout. But at the end of the day, we just want you to know that the secretary understands and agrees that it really matters and it's really important. And so we want to continue to do work that really supports you in this space in terms of family engagement and how we might partner together to do that.
Thanks, Melissa. So in Carolina's session, she talked about, and I'm going to just click us back right here. She talked about being a fangirl for Dr. Karen Mapp. Me too. Okay, and so Dr. Mapp is one of the authors of the dual capacity framework. If you're looking for a framework to say, like, what does family engagement look like? Like, what's the model? What's the theory? What does that look like? I just say go there. It's just dualcapacity.org. Easy peasy. It's a great way to then start to look at why it really matters. What are the potential outcomes and impacts of that? The other piece that she and Dr. Ann Henderson recently released a book called Everyone Wins. This is really important, and the reason why is because it's not just families that win when you engage. I mean, it kind of is intuitive that, yeah, families get to be partners with school when you engage families, but no, the students find higher academic achievement, attendance. The teachers have higher retention and engagement in class. The school community is healthier, right? With higher school climate. There are so many, there's higher retention with school administrators when you have high family engagement. Everyone in the school community wins when you engage families. So this is something that can't be an even better if. It needs to be part of just what we do and ingrained in our approach. So at the U.S. Department of Education, you've heard us talk about raise the bar, lead the world, and these three big buckets around accelerating academic achievement, boldly improving learning conditions, and creating pathways for global engagement. Those three are really important because that's what we believe here at the department, and it's also something that our Secretary Miguel Cardona speaks to. Last year, in 2023, he wrote an op-ed talking about raising the bar for parent partnership in our school. And so I know we just talked about family engagement. There's a lot of ways, like parent partnership is a great alliteration, so we kind of use that term sometimes. But we're not just talking about parents when I say parents. I'm talking about those caring adults in children's lives, regardless of their auntie, uncle, grandparent. That's really about how do we create those strong partnerships. And really what he was saying in that op-ed is that this is a space that we need to be ensuring that there's strong partnership between home and school. And this is not a political issue. This is something that really yields better success for all students and their families and the community in their school. And just kind of going back to that second bullet about, that parents, families, and caregivers are essential partners. That they're a partnership that we can't overlook when we're looking for, well, why isn't this working? That question should always be, how have you engaged families in the design of what that is? How have you engaged families in the implementation? And then how have you engaged families in understanding the impact and outcomes of those? And if you haven't done that, that's probably why it's not working. Okay. So one of the things that I adopted when I came to the department is just this strong statement around every child deserves the benefit of a strong partnership between home and school. Every child deserves the benefits of a strong partnership between home and school. I say that one more time. Every child deserves the benefit of a strong partnership between home and school. That means our most vulnerable young people. That means our kids who might not even have a physical dwelling that they're returning to after school. Every child deserves that strong partnership. And if in your school, in your community, those children that might be most vulnerable don't have that strong partnership, that's who you want to make sure you're addressing first, because that's really where you're going to see those great rewards and that opportunity for those young people to truly flourish. So what we do at the department is we really support parents, families, educators, state and local leaders to help make that happen. There are a few ways that we do that. I kind of summarize those in these bullets here. There's a QR code here. The QR code is helpful because it takes you to our Department of Education site that's pretty easy to remember. It's just ed.gov/parents, ed.gov/parents, but the QR code will be helpful. Really, some of the things that we do to help build that at the federal level are to just listen and support parents directly. And these are family members who really are looking to champion what this family engagement space is. We want to elevate parent voice, but not just parent voice, the actions around it. We support funding and resource centers that support families and educators. That includes our statewide family engagement centers that we have funded 18 so far, and then in our FY25 proposed budget, we have a proposal for increase in funding there. Every state should have a family engagement center, right? We also support parent resource centers in all 50 states. Those parent resource centers are intended to support families of children with special needs, but really what it is that they provide a hub for families to get access at the state level to understand. I mean, each family engagement is local, but at the state level to understand the context that you're in is really important. We also have lots of other opportunities for funding through some of our, the title funds I'm sure you all have heard of, like Title I and Title III. Family engagement are allowable uses in those funds. So let's make sure that within your state, within your local context, that you're aware of what that is. Ask those questions. How are those funds being used to engage families? And if they're not, kind of know that that's a space. Every state has a Title I Family Engagement Council, and so you should, or I think they call it family engagement, but there's a council of parents in every state that helps inform that Title I space. Be part of it. Get involved in that way. There are a wealth of other spaces where family engagement is an allowable use. Community schools are largely based around the model of family engagement. And so at the administration, we have actually increased our investment in community schools in ways that had not been done previously, and we're really excited about that. We also provide some information and resources, in particular for state and local leaders. Sometimes, while well-intentioned, our state and local leaders might not understand the power of family engagement, right? Not because they are dismissing it, they just might not have the resources and tools at their hands. So that one of the things that we did, and I'll talk about it in a lot of detail, is we held a family engagement learning series last year intended for state and local leaders to really get that foundational knowledge. And then lastly, we really try to integrate family engagement through all of our department priorities. And so what does that mean? It means that I'm pulled in lots of directions, but it means I get to work with great colleagues like Melissa and those that are leading the work in all of those Raise the Bar, Lead the World priority areas. A few things, just a quick highlights. I mentioned the statewide family engagement centers last fall. A big announcement was that we invested another $11.4 million in those awards. I've been holding parent empowerment pop-ups around the country, and that's a great time. Not only, part of what we do when we do family engagement is that we have to stop and listen, right? We have to understand what's happening in our communities. At this level, that means that I kind of need to stop and listen here, and then stop and listen here, and then stop and listen over here. And so those pop-ups give us a chance to really listen to parents in their own communities about what they are experiencing, what they need, what they want the U.S. Department of Education to be part of for their communities. And so that's, for me, that's one of the most rewarding parts of my job, is to actually be in community with parents and learn with and from them. We have lots of resources. I think on your chairs you had the sample questions for parents and families to ask in partnering with their child's teachers in schools. We have our website that is a landing page and is going to keep growing. And then we'll talk a little more about the Family Engagement Learning Series briefs. I'm going to hand this back over to Melissa.
So I love that Cecily spoke to the thread of her area, right, and moving through all of the priorities. And of course, it very clearly fits under our priority of creating pathways for global engagement, because we know that language and culture starts at home with the families that our students are surrounded by. And so we need to think about how we engage families that come from different backgrounds, how we do so in a way that's respectful, where we'll be well received and we understand how to engage and connect. And so I just wanted you to also see a through line between the work that we're doing at the large scale, kind of across the agency in terms of the secretary's priority around Raise the Bar and those pathways, and then those three levers that I mentioned this morning. What I think is really important is to really, I hope I'm going to hit the right button here, is really stress this, maybe not, this focus on equitable access for English learners, right? And when we think about equitable access for English learners, that starts with their families, their caregivers, whoever's responsible for ensuring that they're enrolled in school and that they attend school and are supported outside of school each and every day. So we want to be mindful of those students that come to us and that are parts of communities or families that don't necessarily speak the primary language of school, and that also oftentimes have been our most underserved or marginalized students, some that Cecily spoke to, right? This idea of language and family engagement shouldn't be isolated to only a few groups of adults and children that are part of our school systems. We also know that if we're going to make this work every day, especially in every POC, which is our primary office of contact, our divisions you might call them at the agency, should have a focus on family engagement. But we in the Office of English Language Acquisition have made it a priority area. We learned a lot. We went around the country and did listening sessions with families and students, and we wanted to hear what is it that you need from us? What is it that you see happening in your schools that really makes you happy and it's what you want happening in your schools? And what might still be missing? And what is it that you're actually aware of, right? How do you know what goes on day in and day out in terms of those 6 or 7 hours that students are in front of those wonderful adults that are trying to push them down a positive trajectory of academic success? And so we heard a lot of what we really wanted to hear in terms of we know these things happening, and then we heard a lot of there might still be some need to work in ensuring that we're increasing awareness of the programs that our students should have access to and the programs that we should be creating demand for as parents, right, as advocates for our students. So we just want you to know that this family engagement piece is something that is a priority to us and that we understand the need to ensure that if we are going to create awareness across every community, right, and every language that makes up our country, we're going to have to do a better job at accessibility. And so that's where you come in. We want to teach you what's there and build awareness, but we want you to also help us in creating awareness and identifying what more needs to be done. So we've created we love the word toolkit in education. We also have begun to love, as you can see, QR codes at the Department of Education, right? I don't think I ever used a QR code in a meeting until I came to the U.S. Department, which again kind of ages me a little, right? And speaks to how long I've been around, because I was just used to, here is what it is, I'm going to give it to you in an actual document. But this makes good sense. So I want you to know that our English language learner family toolkit can be downloaded on an Android and an Apple phone, which that is, if you think about it, guys, that is pretty innovative, that is pretty revolutionary, and we are proud of it, right? Because one thing we can be certain of is somebody in our families is going to have access to a telephone. Would you agree? Access to an actual, cell phone, not one of those landlines that now many wouldn't even know what we're talking about. So please know you can download this on your phone. It's easily accessible. And we're also proud of the fact that it's in the top 5 languages represented in our country other than English. So you can find it in Arabic. You can find it in Swahili. You can find it in, I think it's Vietnamese and Portuguese. And there's one other language, Spanish, duh. And then, of course, English. Now, I also know that isn't necessarily enough, right? We can't stop there because depending on where you are in this country, those might not necessarily be the top 5 languages that your context is representative of. But we are trying to ensure that we exemplify what it means to model giving access to speakers of other languages than English. So let's talk about our family toolkit that we're really proud of and that we're hoping will continue to be downloaded by many and that will actually become a tool that is used by our families and the educators that they engage with in their K-12 systems. So we wanted to provide our families with useful information and resources about U.S. schools. And I think what I have really grown to appreciate about this toolkit is that it isn't necessarily families of English learners that need to that need to develop more understanding about our U.S. schools and what resources are available to us as parents and then to our students as students. The resources that we continue to develop and give access to only continue to grow, right? And so keeping up with that growth is really hard as a parent. I shared with you this morning that I have 3 children, one of which is in the K-12 system and the other that's in the K-16 system, and then 2 granddaughters. And my daughter every day sends me a question about something she's trying to better understand as she's making decisions for my 2 beautiful granddaughters and their school settings. We also wanted to empower English learner families to support their children as they intend and enroll in U.S. schools. And it might have been Carolina that said it best in her session this morning, is that there's no parent that wakes up any day and says, I want my child to go to school and get the worst education possible, right? Or not get the best education possible. We also know that there is no educator that wakes up thinking how they're going to harm children, right? Or provide a disservice to children. This toolkit will not only empower our families, but it will also support our educators in the role and responsibilities they have around meaningful communication and making those connections between families and schools and communities. And we also just want to increase the opportunities that are already provided and sustain those that have been determined to really work based on research. So, our toolkit is organized around 6 areas of content, which are organized in 6 particular chapters. It includes, every chapter has an overview of the specific topic of content. It speaks to family and student rights, which empower us, and so we want to ensure that families and students understand their civil rights and our civil obligations to them. It also includes suggested questions to ask school staff, which Cecily also shared with you a document that's been created at the agency that also includes some of those questions that you might ask. Sometimes this is the hardest part to figure out, right, as families, is what should I even be asking? I mean, what is it that I want to know? You don't know what you don't know, right? And so we've suggested some questions for families to ask school staff. What might we ask a teacher versus the principal, right? Versus maybe the director of special education or the director of English learners, and so on and so forth. And what we're also hoping is that as families download these chapters and use them, that they'll be sharing questions that they've realized they've had to ask, and we should be including in these different chapters. And it also includes tips for families, which again for me are tips that are even valuable for me as a parent. And then all the resources that are available to us for free online, whether they come from the department or a different national organization who's invested in what happens with families and students. So the first chapter is focused on enrolling your child in school. So it talks about access, it talks about information and documentation needed to enroll children in school, which we know oftentimes can be overwhelming and unfortunately sometimes becomes a barrier for our families. We need to overcome that barrier because children have the right to go to school, right? And we want them in our schools. It also speaks to the English proficiency assessments and the specialized language services that we're responsible for providing. And I think it's really important to note that we do not want families to feel like they should not be open and transparent about the beautiful languages that are spoken as a first language in their homes other than English. We want them to wear that as a sign of pride, and we want to make sure that that educators, leaders in school systems know the languages that our children speak other than English, and that we determine then where are they in their journey of language acquisition in English as well as their heritage language, so that we provide them the very specific services that they need as children who are linguistically gifted. Not linguistically deficit, but linguistically gifted. And then finally, what are the nuances of like transportation and schedules, which are hard to manage? We also hope then this will ease families' anxieties, right, around school, that will prepare educators to discuss these topics, because we've also included tips for our educators. And then for educators in schools to be ready to anticipate the questions you're going to ask. Chapter 2 is focused on attending school in the United States. What does that mean? What does that mean in terms of parent involvement, school meals, uniforms, all those things that when we get that letter at the beginning of the year, we all look at and go, oh my God, I have how many days before school starts, right, to get my child ready. We hope that this particular chapter will help us in preparing to discuss options for our families. What programs do you want your children to be a part of? Including those advanced programs, right, that should be available for all of our children. How do I find out more? How do I ensure that my children are involved? We also want you to understand what's available before school, after school, and during the summer when we offer lots of opportunities for students. In Chapter 3, we're talking about other educational programs for students and thinking about things that happen outside of traditional school building settings, like charter schools, magnet schools that are very specialized in certain areas. Whether your children are interested in career and technical education or the arts, right? Or building different languages that lead them to things like the seal of biliteracy. It is our responsibility to ensure that you're aware of those programs. And this chapter nicely outlines the different programs that are provided across the country. But again, more importantly, remember, it gives you some of those questions you might ask to access that information. For Chapter 4, it's finding extracurricular activities for your child. We know that what children get to do outside of school is oftentimes even more important than what they get to do inside of school. Sports builds leadership skills. It builds cognitive abilities, physical strength, and all of those things. So we want you to understand what else is available to students that is outside of the traditional curriculum, that allows them places, spaces to go where many children oftentimes, to Cecily's point, might not have places and spaces to go that are healthy, that are nurturing, and that allow them to tap into those things that are of interest to them. So it'll help you explore community resources. It'll help you understand the logistical information and costs that might be associated with extracurricular activities, childcare, opportunities to get some of those things funded as well. And then Chapter 5 is focused on the health and safety of your child at school. More than ever, we're talking about health and safety and the importance of that, right? Children that aren't healthy aren't going to learn. Children that don't feel safe are not going to learn. Teachers that are facilitating environments where children aren't healthy and don't feel safe are not going to be able to teach. So we want you to know what the emergency procedures are, what it means if students are being bullied or harassed, what are the food and medical costs associated to school, and then how might we access some of those community resources so that we can keep our students healthy, right? So that we can provide them those things that sometimes are a bit challenging for us as parents or for parents in our community. And then if you look at this last bullet, again, this is something I've been asked about several times throughout the day today, is translation and interpretation services, right? You have the right to those. You should be communicated with in a language that you can clearly understand. And then our last chapter has to do with helping your child to be successful in school. What does it mean? You know, when you get all of these reports with all of this data and information, how do you ensure you interpret that in a way that will be useful for you? What are the events and activities that happen throughout the school year that would be great for you to partake in, that of course you want to be involved in and attend? What does it mean to attend a parent-teacher conference? And again, what questions do I come to school with beyond just wanting to know if my little Mario has behaved? And I will tell you that even as an educator, my first go-to question is, how's Mario behaving in school? Because I know how Mario behaves at home, right? But of course, that's not all that matters, right? And I, of course, ask those other questions. Tell me more about how he's engaging in learning. What can I do to help you? How can we be partners? And so this is really to guide EL families to the resources that can help them support their students academically. Because at the end of the day, we all know that we want our students to be successful and to achieve academically at high levels so that they can make those decisions about their futures, right? We know our children are our most precious assets that we send to an environment each and every day that we expect is better preparing them to be productive members of a larger society, right? They are the future of our country. And so it makes sense that we should work very closely together. Here's another QR code, ladies and gentlemen. But I'm also going to ask Elizabeth to come around with these nifty postcards that, we're educators at heart, right? So we're always trying to create resources that, again, we know people will appreciate, but will be easy to use and navigate, and at the end of the day, give them substantive information and tools that they can use. So the National Clearinghouse for English Language Acquisition is our repository hub. We have over 58,000 resources in this hub that are available for teachers, are available for parents. There's lots and lots and lots of things there. I always get to use my favorite word, which is plethora. We have a plethora of resources there, from webinars to fact sheets to toolkits. So we have a newcomer toolkit as well. We have an English learner toolkit, and then our famous English learner family toolkit. So please use that QR code, use that postcard, dig around, do some research in that particular hub, and share, share, share. Always remember, sharing is caring, okay? All right.
Okay. Thank you, Melissa. Okay, so I know we're like the session right after lunch. You guys are doing great. I'm going to try to do a little something to spice things up. I am from Washington, D.C., born and raised, and we have a music in D.C. called go-go music. I don't know. Has anybody ever heard of go-go music? Okay, all right. So an important piece of that is call and response. Okay, so the question is, where y'all from? And then I want you to yell out where you're from, okay? Ready? Where y'all from? Where y'all from? One more time, really loud. Where y'all from? Woo! Okay. So why do you think I did that, other than to keep us awake after lunch? Family engagement is so local, okay? Everything that you do is unique to your community, to your school, to your community, the demographics, the culture, everything about family engagement is super local. So what I'm about to share is what we've done at the federal level, and I'm not trying to say that this is exactly how you will do it in your neighborhood, but what you'll do is you'll take it and you'll play with it, you'll mold it, you'll do something that makes sense for where you are from, okay? Again, another QR code. I'm gonna stand over here so you can access it. This takes you to the web page for our Family Engagement Learning Series. The Family Engagement Learning Series is 6 webinars, 6 of them. Do you know how many hours of that equates to? They were each an hour and a half, 10 hours of videos. 10 hours of experts from the field, bright spots from across the country, big cities, rural areas, researchers, all coming together to really just drop some knowledge about family engagement, okay? One of the things that was really impactful about this is that I started this job and I kept hearing, we want to do it, but we don't know how. We want to do something, but what should we do? What's the evidence around this one or that one? And so the intent of the Family Engagement Learning Series was to really bring together experts, practitioners, to be able to build a repository of information and resources on 6 key topics. I'm going to go into those topic areas now that you all have had a second with the QR code. Okay, there we go. The first one that we did, and this is, look, Carolina, fangirl on Dr. Karen Mapp over here. The first webinar focused on family engagement to support student success. We intentionally kept this one broad, but really focused on academic outcomes. How is family engagement supporting English language learning, Spanish language learning, mathematics? How are we seeing these outcomes in academic success as a result of super engaged families and communities? This quote, I won't read it to you, but it's really important because it ties to that everyone wins, right? It doesn't matter which partner we're talking about, whether they're at home or at school, everyone wins when we do this work well. This is part I didn't say is that the webinars were so useful. We were getting so many downloads that folks were like, yeah, but I really want something more accessible. So what we did was we came up with these briefs. They are 4-page briefs that summarize each webinar. It's an exciting resource if you're in your community and you're like, hey, my principal needs a little primer on this, or, my board members need a little primer on this. This is a great chance to send this to them, to have a conversation about what's in them. Each brief, kind of like Melissa shared about the Toolkit, each brief has the same sections. There's like an intro, an overview that really says like why that particular topic area is important, gives a quick overview of the research in that area, and then speaks to some of our learnings from the bright spots, because in each webinar, we identified like 4 to 6 different bright spot presenters. We talked about key takeaways and strategies for you to read this, watch the webinar, and walk away with and go right and do something with. And then the back page on each one is resource links so that you have something to go to immediately right after you either read the brief or watch the webinar. The second webinar and brief is really focused on family engagement to support student engagement and attendance. If there is one lever that we know, well, let me back up. Post-pandemic, one thing that we have seen, unfortunately, is that we're in an attendance crisis right now. Our young people are not going to school at the same levels that they were going to school pre-pandemic, and that still wasn't good enough. We talked about our secretary saying that where we were pre-pandemic wasn't good enough, especially for our most marginalized young people. Attendance is a crisis now. And in this crisis, one of the approaches, the strategies, the levers that has found resounding impact, family engagement. What we did in this webinar is that we had Hetty Chang from Attendance Works facilitate an amazing conversation with several practitioners, several from the state of Connecticut, where they have done a statewide approach to attendance through their LEAP program that includes parent-teacher home visits as well. And I say parent-teacher home visits, but they're not all educators that do the home visits. It's really unique, where they have community members as part of that. So it could be local church members, local volunteer organizations, they found that it didn't matter whether it was the teacher that did the home visits or another community member, that home visit alone built trust with that family that impacted the attendance of those young people coming to school. One of the things that we know is that when kids come to school, when kids feel like they're going to be engaged in school, when they have a safe and supportive environment, they succeed. And so this is a space where when we engage families, we know better. Why aren't students feeling like they are engaged? Why aren't they feeling safe? Why aren't students having the learning environment that will lead to their success? And we're able to address those things. So that's what we talk about in that second webinar. The third one here, I'm sure, resonates with everyone in the room. And this one was focused on family engagement to support immigrant and multilingual families. Last year, Dr. Stephanie Cuevas with Chapman University released hold on, let me make sure I get the right title. Boop, boop, boop. Released a report titled Becoming an Ally, Partnering with Immigrant Families to Promote Student Success. This is a really impactful report. It's when you go to the briefs, you'll be able to click right into that report. But really what she does is she documents the research that says if anyone is questioning whether family engagement is the right lever, she says you don't have a choice but to do it. This is the primary lever that you should be doing. And that educators hold that responsibility. We have to build capacity with educators to effectively partner with families, especially intentionally with families who are coming from students who are coming from immigrant families or families where English might not be the language spoken at home. What was great about this one is that we had folks from Rhode Island we had the head of the Rhode Island Department of Education, from Colorado, from California, all really speaking to the positive impacts they've seen for students when they not just address the linguistic access, which language access is really important, but a cultural sensitivity and an awareness by the educators of what different communities might be experiencing. This is another opportunity where we had someone talk about home visiting and that educators seeing, oh, this isn't this individual student, this is part of something that's culturally normative, and they build an awareness as an educator. One of the things that we heard is that as a district in Aurora, Colorado, they brought families in to say, well, what should our engagement activities look like? You heard me. They didn't design it by the people that worked there. They brought in dozens of family members to say, what do we need to do, especially to address the needs of our immigrant and multilingual families? The fourth webinar we had was really focused on student mental health and well-being. This is, directly, all of these, while they were individual webinars, are directly linked with each other, right? If students feel well and safe and supported, they come to school, so the attendance piece. But the other piece is that we have to understand, and the research that was presented was that the neuroscience behind having a safe and trusting relationship with an adult actually is what leads to well-being, right? And so it's by building those trusting relationships. I asked my own son, who was in middle school last year, who are the trusted adults that you go to, right? We should all be able to ask that question and to have young people say, here's, I go to Melissa, I go to Carolyn, they should be able to name adults in the building that they feel like they can go to, because that is what builds their well-being, their sense of safety and security, and there's neuroscience behind it, and that's what was presented in that webinar. And then we spent the last two webinars in the briefs really focusing on the two bookends of the educational spectrum. That kindergarten readiness and early school success was one. And this is really important because not all kids come to school ready to learn. And there are lots of reasons for that, right? I met with a group of parents. I was in St. Paul, Minnesota, and I was speaking with a dad who was from Cambodia, and he said, we don't have books at home. And I said, okay, let's talk about that. And he said, there was no way that I could have had books growing up where I lived because it was so wet. A book wouldn't have just existed in our house without molding and mildewing. Think about this. Think about this. And so he's like, I didn't know what to do or where to start, right? And so he said, the first time I was given a book, I was so proud, right? And so we have to always think about these cultural, not just, again, the language piece is really important, but when you have families that might not have come from the United States and you don't understand all of their geographic backgrounds, there are pieces that really influence how they relate to things that we consider normative by American suburban culture norms, right? And so, if that means that you have book giveaways like we had here at this convening, right? Or that there's the librarians and the library access is something that's really promoted so that kids are exposed to these things before they enter school. We had an organization called Parent Corps on this webinar that really worked with parents in early school settings to really help build that awareness and knowledge of what school will be when their children enter into K-12 education. And by doing that, by creating that warm and welcoming environment before they go to K-12, parents walk in there tall and proud. Parents are ready. Grandparents are ready. And they know to say, hey, you didn't do that thing that I experienced in preschool. And the other piece is that the parents are aware of what they should be looking for and asking for academically as well. We have to make sure that we let parents know that these are some of the milestones to look for as your child is learning to write and read and connect colors and other environmental things. If they aren't meeting those milestones, it's parents that will see them first. So that was a great space where we really went deep about what real partnership looks like. Because these are the parents, these are the caregivers of young people who aren't yet in that space of coming home and telling mom and dad everything. But it's really a space where when families are connected, you can see the ongoing cycle of educators and families working together. At the other end of the educational spectrum, and I'm speaking as the mom of a current high schooler, when they don't want you to be part of anything, we really delved into why it's important to align the aspirations that you have as a family for your young person to what school is doing, right? And that one of the data pieces highlighted in this webinar was that the overwhelming majority of families expect that their child is going to leave school and go on to some level of higher education or training in order to find the career of their choice. However, many of them don't start that preparation until 12th grade. what we talked about in this webinar is how do we engage families much younger, when the children are much younger, so that they are prepared to enter into their career pathway. And college is one path to a career, but that they are prepared to enter into their career pathway, and that those can include lots of college opportunities in high school, that they can include training opportunities well before they graduate, internships, all kinds of. That's it. They can graduate with associate degrees, with certificates. When I worked in a school district, I had a student who came to me and said, do you want to know how much I'm going to earn when I leave school? And I said, I don't know that I want to know. But he graduated from one of our technology programs with a certificate that had him leaving high school making $90,000. We need all of them. He had a signed commitment letter for $90,000. And that is because he went into high school saying he wanted to go into technology. He was in a career CTE program that got him the certifications and had him on the way. But you can't really do that without families being part of that.
Yeah.
So this is where we have to really engage families. I'm gonna, what was that over there?
And there you go. There is another one
Yes,
for you.
another QR code. So I always include this just because look at that little boy's face.
Yeah.
I'm a boy mom, and so I just, I melt for little boys. But this is the QR code for our Raise the Bar. I think each of you has gotten that flyer. But importantly, this shows you the detailed layout of what that Raise the Bar, Lead the World framework is. And you'll see our connection between everything that Melissa and I have presented in alignment with that Raise the Bar, Lead the World framework.
Thank you, Cecily. And I appreciate how explicit she was about really helping you understand our, cradle to career focus, right, at the U.S. Department of Education, that it starts really early on, and it goes way beyond the time that they leave us in 12th grade. That impact continues to evolve as our children move forward. I want to share just a couple more resources without a QR code, believe it or not, because I think it's important. I think Cecily spoke to the importance of students having that opportunity to kind of engage in something that they're interested in, hence this young man who left school making more than probably all of his teachers and principals on his campus. But I think what's also we have found is also highly valuable is language as a promising and valued credential along with that, right? So imagine if this young person not only studied this field, but spoke English and Spanish, or English and Arabic, or English and Portuguese. What is that going to mean in terms of what happens to that higher demand in the field, in the career field, and then that possibility to take on different positions, higher level positions, and of course, make what they're very interested in at that age, and that's money, right? That's money. All right, so I have just the benefits of multilingualism. Sometimes when you're explaining this, people aren't quite sure that matters, and that really developing a child's heritage language should happen at home, and that it's a parent's responsibility. Not true, right? How we want your help and support, but how language is developed in school is very different, right? It's very academically driven and formal, and we want students to develop that literacy at high levels. So we've got it here in 5 languages, again, because we're trying to exemplify and model what it means to provide information in a way that's accessible. And I appreciate Cecily's really punctuating the cultural piece, because we know that language without culture doesn't exist, and culture without language doesn't exist. So they're both relevant and hugely important. So with that, in every language possible, we want to thank you for...
I forgot one thing.
Yes, sure.
Before we close out.
Yes.
I'm going to hold these up. So I don't know how many of you all have heard of FAFSA.
We were doing so well. But
I know it's
important.
but I want to say that we have
Yes.
flyers here. One of the things that we have been emphasizing, the department redesigned the FAFSA form this year. It has meant some hiccups for some families,
But also some great
but some
possibilities.
great possibilities. There are billions dollars more available for Pell Grants for our most economically needy families.
Yes.
And the first step is to complete the form.
Which is much
And
simpler.
it is
than
much
before.
simpler. I had a parent who did a video for us saying that it used to take her over an hour to do because she and her son were both students, right? And now she did them both in like 20-some minutes, right? This is cutting the completion time to a fraction of what it used to be. We have an English and Spanish checklist for parents and students so that you have the resources you need, the information. Please, if you or you work in a community that needs more information on FAFSA,
Contact us.
holla.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a wonderful time dancing. Thank you for being with us.